Yeah, a rule that I live by with all of my teams is teach with every touch. Like if you are talking to your customer, taking their time, they should be learning something from you. And when you think about what you're doing, you're spending 100% of your time thinking about this one problem space, and you're seeing how good companies do it well, and you're seeing how bad companies have messed up. And so I always looked at this as like, hey, I can tell you what all of your peers are doing and where it's working and where it's not working. Like regardless of if you buy the thing that I'm selling, you can learn something from your interaction with me today.
Welcome everyone to the 10X Go-to-Market podcast. So excited to be here with Meka, who is my first and one of my favorites investors of Pocus from 2021. So been working together for such a long time and very excited to have him here. Meka's a partner at First Round. Previously to First Round, he was sales leaders at multiple different types of companies. So he knows everything about sales, including Mixpanel and Stripe. And at Mixpanel, he ran over an 100-person global revenue team. So very excited to dive in with Meka. But first, if you are new to the live podcast, feel free to ask any of your questions on all of the topics top of mind for anything, how to become a 10X go-to-market professional. And we will get to it within the conversation because this is really a time to ask the community any of your questions that you're thinking about in building go-to-market. So before we dive in, Meka, first, thank you so much to be here. I'm so excited for this. Do you want to give the group a bit of a background on who you are before I dive in and probe you with lots of different questions?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Alexa. So my name is Meka. I'm a partner here at First Round. We're an early stage venture firm that's been in business for about 20 years. We are the first backers behind companies like Uber, Square, Roblox, Notion, and Clay. Prior to First Round, I was leading sales teams at Mixpanel and at Stripe. Before that, I was doing go-to-market work for Bain with Fortune 50 companies. And before that, I was at business school and I worked for the Cleveland Indians, now the Cleveland Guardians. So quite a varied background. In college, I did a summer in investment banking before realizing that wasn't for me. And so I have a strange path to venture. I have a strange path to sales, but I think it makes for, a great canvas.
Amazing. Before we dive into all of your predictions and trends you're seeing in sales, I'd love to dive a bit deeper into your background and how you went from working at the MLB to the world of tech, which is not a natural evolution, but for you it is. So maybe you can talk to us about that journey before going from MLB and then thinking through how did that then get you into the world of tech? How did that inform your way of thinking through your career progression?
Yeah. So it's funny because I can tell this like magical through line of how baseball and venture are the same. And I can say like, hey, I had this idea that I was going to do this since I was 22. But honestly, it's like a lot of luck. And what really happened was I just followed really good people along the way. I'm a child of Nigerian immigrants from the suburbs of Chicago. Never thought I'd be living in Silicon Valley. Never thought I'd be investing in companies. But what I always was told is just follow really good people and like the rest will take care of itself. And that's kind of what I did. And so out of college, I was an econ and finance major. I did not want to go to banking like a lot of my classmates from Princeton. And so I tried to figure out like what would be an interesting job. And I found out that the general manager of the Cleveland Indians at the time was a Princeton grad. So like any good salesperson, I sent him an outbound and it was carefully crafted to make sure he knew I knew who he was. I was prepared. This was not going to be a waste of his time. Even if he didn't want to hire me, he would still appreciate the 30-minute conversation. And so my SDR days go back to being a junior in college. And so I spent 4 years there leading player development and leading baseball operations. And so our job was to find the best talent wherever it was and help them get the most out of their potential. And so as a small market club, the only way we could be successful was seeing things before other people see them. And so this is the venture through line. This is the betting on hidden talent before other people do, believing the impossible is possible. And also it just goes back to people. Like so much of what we do here at First Round is finding amazing people and helping them, achieve their dreams. And so did that for 4 years, loved it, went to business school, tried to understand, get the fundamentals of business. Out of business school, I went to Bain. And for me, it was because I sort of had a non-traditional background having worked in sports. And so wanted to make sure I had something traditional on my resume so people knew exactly like who I was and what I did. And I kind of feel like I got the business 101. Like you got the sort of theoretical 101 from business school, and I wanted the practical 101 from Bain. And, I was in the Bain San Francisco office. And when you're in San Francisco and all of these people around you are like, I'm going to change industries tomorrow. Like it's so hard to ignore that energy. And so I slowly got pulled into the startup ecosystem. I asked friends from business school who were the most interesting companies. And at the time, I spent a bunch of time with the Stripe team and with the Coinbase team and ended up joining Stripe. I feel like both decisions would have worked out well, but spent the next 4 years there building out the sales organization. And at that sales organization, I was leading the team that sold to early stage startups and SMBs. And, the way Stripe gets paid is we make money when our customers make money. And so we'd have these customers who 1 year would be doing 10,000 in ARR. And then the next year would be doing 1 million or 10 million in ARR. And I was like, what are these magical companies that are growing so quickly? How are they doing it? I just love the ambition of these people. And that's sort of when I got interested in angel investing. And that brought me to first round many years later.
That is awesome. One thing that you mentioned earlier was when you sent a cold email to get that job at the MLB. And we had Mark Goldberger on from VP of Enterprise Sales at Ramp recently. And he was saying when he interviews for sellers, he looks for people displaying that sales skill and hustle and just, trying shit early in their career. And so is this something that you see early in your career? Like, did you have a lemonade stand when you were 13 trying to sell lemonade? Or was it more just outbound skills that made you think that sales is where you should be?
Yeah, it's funny because everyone always told me that like I would be good at sales and I didn't really get it. Honestly, when people would say that to me, I kind of felt a little bit icky because I think that when people say you'd be good at sales, you just think of like car salesman or Cutco knives or like you don't think of what I think enterprise sales is. Honestly, I still believe that I'm in a sales role. The best founders have choices on who they want to partner with. And so it's up to me to explain why myself and first round is the right platform for them to help achieve their dreams. And so since I was a kid, I feel like I've always been, I've liked working with people. I like doing things which I believe in the cause. Like I think the key to being good at selling is really having a product that you care about and that you think is truly transformational. The rest kind of takes care of itself. And then I always was entrepreneurial. Like my favorite games as a kid was this video game called Wall Street Raider. And it was like you were a trader. I still remember like watching my first Shark Tank episode after college. Like I've always, for me, I'm just like interested in how things work in business models. And so it's just been a way that I've been wired, from day one is like always trying to peel back a layer and understand why businesses work in a certain way.
Do you think, because a lot of people, I remember when I was at business school or undergrad and going to sales wasn't a thing that a lot of people did. There is kind of sometimes a negative connotation. Do you think that's changing now? Because especially now when I look at the sellers at Pocus, they're much more consultants than they are, a transactional seller. And so do you think that kind of reputation or, you'd be good for sales has evolved and is evolving?
I think among smart people, it's evolving. Like for me, when you think about tech companies, they have two jobs to do: build amazing product and get that amazing product in the hands of customers. And so I was not an engineer. I was not a CS major. I was not going to build a product. Maybe when AI and Cursor and, AI coding helps, maybe I can do that at some day. But when I was, coming up in tech, sales was my path. Also, being close to the customer is like one of the things that we look for in founders that we invest in. And so it's just so critical. So much comes from really knowing your customer in and out and their problems and how they solve them. And so I've met a lot of founders who had sales experience either as a kid or as their first job out of college. I think more and more people are understanding how valuable sales is. And I'm sure this as a CEO, like you are chief evangelist, you are chief salesperson. Like your job is to make sure people are using Pocus. And so if you're wise, you understand how strategic and important it is. And I also think that selling has changed and evolved as time has gone. And I think that the skill set needed to be a really good salesperson, it is a consultative seller. It is somebody who's really thinking about problems and helping problem solve. So I really feel like that stigma is like moving away, especially sort of in our industry.
100%. And we've talked about that. And when I talk to other people that are thinking, hey, I'm thinking about being a founder, is this a journey I want to go on? And a lot of the times I say it's really just a sales job. You're selling your product, you're selling candidates, you're selling investors. I really do feel like being a founder is being another type of head of sales. And so actually, before I dive into how sales has changed, because I want to double click into that, is that something you see among your founders? Is it that you either have to be like really good at sales or really good at engineering, or does everyone have to be good at sales?
Yeah, I think you need to have business critical spikes for the domain you're building in. So for instance, if you're building a bottom up product, maybe selling doesn't need to be like the number one thing you're good at, but I still think you need to really understand your customer. I would say the most successful founders I've seen are extremely commercial and extremely close to their customer. So like the thing that I love to see is a technical product oriented founder who also loves being out in front of customers. And sometimes you have that split across. You've got a CEO and a CTO, and those two people combine to being an amazing founding team. But I think it's really special when you find people who are somewhat technical, who are deep in the product, who also love to be sort of like that champion who's the tip of the spear as they're talking to customers.
Yep. And that translates to excellent sellers too, right? Like the best sellers I've seen have deep product expertise of what they're selling and are deeply embedded into their customer's business and figuring out, what are the top priorities that my prospect will care about and how can I figure out how my product can solve that solution?
Yeah, a rule that I live by with all of my teams is teach with every touch. Like if you are talking to your customer, taking their time, they should be learning something from you. And when you think about what you're doing, you're spending 100% of your time thinking about this one problem space, and you're seeing how good companies do it well, and you're seeing how bad companies have messed up. And so I always looked at this as like, hey, I can tell you what all of your peers are doing and where it's working and where it's not working. Like, regardless of if you buy the thing that I'm selling, you can learn something from your interaction with me today.
Can we dive into teach with every touch? I like that. Is that on everything in terms of outbound, in terms of conversations you have, and what kind of, is it more teaching around the product or the category, the space, market trends, or all of the above?
Yeah. I mean, I think that like if you really zoom out, everyone's goal is just like to be successful. And so when you're talking to a potential customer, you've got to understand like what their problems are. And ideally you're teaching them about something, a top 3 priority for them. And I think teach with every touch starts with a really good outbound message. I think for sure in that first 30-minute call, like when I think about a seller using a 30-minute call as strictly and delivering zero value for the customer, it drives me up the wall. I'm like, you've just wasted a chance to actually provide value for a customer. Like I understand why you've got to do qualification, but you got to do both. Like you've got to qualify your user, and you also have to leave them being like, that was a good use of my time. Like I learned something that's going to be helpful in my day to day. And if you don't deliver value, like you will archive the email. If you don't deliver the value and you're in the middle of a really long call, like, but oh, sorry, something came up, or you're not going to get that next meeting. And so in every single interaction, I just think it's important to leave the prospect with something that is helping them move forward.
And then for those discovery calls, you really do need to uncover the pain in order to have an effective evaluation. So how do you balance that of uncovering pain and also finding a ways to add value?
Yeah. Well, when I think about like a good qual call or a good first call, like the talk track should be, 60-40, 70-30. And like people like talking about themselves. So it's really, if you know how to do it well, it's easy to get that person to talk 70% of the time. But then when I think about my 30%, like every word matters. And I think of that 30% bunch, I think 75% of it, ideally you should be thinking about how you're delivering value and answering questions for somebody. And because again, you're the expert here. You spent a bunch of time doing this thing, trying to solve this problem. For the founder or whoever the decision maker is, this is just like one of 20 things on your list. And so if you can't deliver value, if you can't provide some education, if you can't provide some best practices, like you're probably not selling properly.
That's what we've been focusing on a lot with our new launch of AI strategy, to be able to find ways to surface those value wins and being consultative to customers. And something that we're seeing a lot of is that sales has shifted from being more of a transactional, you can just get deals done, to more of this, you need to be strategic in highly competitive markets. Have you seen, so that's from our perspective of being in sales tech, zooming out and seeing the perspective of an investor that has been looking at sales tech for 4 years. What have you seen the market evolve over time?
Yeah, I think the market's changed a lot in sort of 4 years. I guess if I were to like zoom out macro, my takeaway is that point solutions are dead. They're out. So there was an era where there was like, everyone was trying to build a solution for customer success. And I think people have realized like splitting the record across lots of different SaaS tools is hard. And what that means is oftentimes I think somebody shows up to a meeting, underprepared because they see their slice of the world and they don't see the whole slice of the world. And so when I think about sellers, when I think about customer journeys, like you want the thing to feel so seamless. Like you don't want there to feel like gaps. Like there's going to be a handoff from an AE to a CSM, but when things are done right, it doesn't feel like a gap. You feel like, oh, this person was really knowledgeable about one thing and this person was really knowledgeable about another thing. And I didn't have to re-explain myself. And so I think, and especially from the investor landscape, the things that I'm most excited about are really trying to solve a lot of problems across the customer stack. Like you obviously can't be all things to all people, but I'm more excited about solutions that may pair sales and CSM or sales and success and support. Basically just thinking about being slightly more horizontal and allowing you to deliver a more cohesive experience to that customer from first touch to renewal.
Yeah. And beyond just the cohesive experience, it's also CFOs are slashing budget. And so it helps with that as well. It's both end user experience as well as just driving towards budget consolidation.
Yeah. And then the other thing that you sometimes see too is like two people who use two different tools will have different sources of truth. And like one has to be right or wrong. And you're like, okay, how do I solve this conflict? Which information source is right? And like that is just churn inside of an organization that you should never have.
Yep. And the question that I'm sure you know is coming up. 4 years investing in sales tech, thinking about sales tech. How is AI influencing the space and the future of it?
Yeah. So I think we're in the early innings. Like I think we're in the second inning. And for people who don't watch baseball, there's 9 innings. It doesn't.
Thank you, Meka. I feel.
I don't know. People don't like sports, but so we're in the second inning. We're in the very earliest days. And my sense is that today we should be thinking about AI as a co-pilot. I think in the future, we may be thinking about AI as more of an autopilot. The other thing that I would add is I believe that the influence right now is disproportionate to consumer and SMB, where people are more risk averse or more risk seeking and willing to experiment more. And so to make this more tangible, I would say that like the things that I'm bullish about today are allowing sellers to spend their human time more meaningfully with their prospects. So when I say teach with every touch, it's like, how do you spend more of each touch teaching something more meaningful? And so you could imagine that is just using AI to help you do account research better and drive conversion rates from your outbound. You could then think about that as like, I'm showing up and I'm meeting Alexa for the first time. I should know everything about Alexa. I shouldn't be asking questions that I could have got the answer to on the internet or that like ChatGPT could have told me about. Like you want to be far more prepared. And then finally, like I always told people, if we are ever the bottleneck to our customers buying, that is a huge problem. And so when they respond, we respond 10 minutes later. When they submitted a call request, we're calling them back in 5 minutes. Like we've just got to move faster and with more efficiency. And then on the side of like all hype, like all sizzle, no actual stake, I think it's like AI SDR, AI AE, like people buy from people. Like the voice models are getting better, but it still feels like you're calling United and they like can't hear you when you pronounce your name. And, you know, it just sounds off. Like I don't think people want to buy expensive software from like an IVR phone tree. Again, I think this may change as the technology gets a lot better, but folks who think that like the path to better, like more ARR and like stronger growth and stronger retention is to like take away this person that people love who are like teaching them things and like replace it with AI that like hallucinates, sounds funny, is hard to communicate with. Like, I just think it's bonkers.
Yeah. So, and for what it's worth, I completely agree with both of those. I'm hearing two things. One, it's more common in kind of consumer SMB where there's less risk, more experimentation. Two, seeing more success with Copilot versus Autopilot. In terms of the more effective with SMB, how do you feel about large enterprises adopting kind of AI sales?
Yeah.
Are we still just like, they're too scared to do it? It's too early. They're not ready to commit, or do you feel like it's getting there?
I think the part of the reason why I think it's getting there is like every board is hearing about, you know, someone slashing provider X and using AI and being far more efficient. And so I think there's this top-down push to say, how can we do more with less? And so right now you see a lot of organizations, small, medium, and large, who are trying things. And so when you look at the revenue quality, a lot of these AI companies, like retention is horrible. People are willing to try. You see people going from 0 to 10 very quickly, but then the renewal comes up and people are like, how much value did this actually deliver? And I just think that I think it's going to get there, but I think the value delivery is not fully there yet. And where it is, and it's not fully there yet in some of the situations where people are trying to force fit AI where it won't work. And so I think there's a lot of receptivity to trying new things because I think we all believe it's going to get there. And so I think AI is a conversation starter across a lot of categories, and people are willing to pick up the phone and explore. And again, learn, try to understand how are people using it effectively. But I think that like of these solutions out there, less than half are delivering real business impact to customers today.
Yeah, what I've seen is 2023 was the year of AI experimental budget. 2024 was the year of AI paranoia for CFOs of thinking, okay, what ROI did I get from this?
Yep.
Where do you see 2025 going?
Well, I think 2025 is just going to be a really tough year. And I don't mean to be a tough year if you're not prepared. But I think first, we're going to see a huge collapse in cold outbound conversion rates. Like everyone has these tools that's spitting more junk out there. Like, and the junk is just like people are getting more and more annoyed with like the spam calls and the emails that again, don't seem like they're coming from a human. So in that like collapse in cold outbound conversion rates, there's going to be some shining stars who are like spending the right time to craft the right message that actually converts. And then there's going to be all the junk, the anchor that's like weighing people down. Two, I think there's going to be sort of like shrinking budgets for SaaS. There's going to be this still continued drive for efficiency. And what I would say is that like one of the theses I believe in are that companies are going to remain smaller for longer. And that the key impact of AI is just going to be each of us have superpowers that make us far more efficient, which means you don't need to hire as many people. And so for folks who are charging on a seat-based model, I think you could be in trouble. I think for folks who are charging on some sort of ROI outcomes basis, I think that kind of like jives with where I think the world is going.
Totally makes sense. So cold outbound's dead. And I agree with that. Or, there's a lot of hot takes. Cold outbound is not as effective as it was. And it's becoming worse because Gen AI is just making it spammier. Do you have a perspective on what is going to work in terms of generating pipeline?
Yeah. I think meeting customers where they are, I've been surprised at how much, like, as much as we lived through the COVID era where like all business was done on Zoom, I think there was this like snapback. And so I've actually seen a lot of companies investing in events. Some of them are like showing up at conferences and meeting their customers face to face. Others are doing like sort of small dinners where they're bringing a bunch of thought partners together. But I feel like humans drive, like love and crave human connection. And so I'm just seeing a lot more when you're looking at sort of like the deal source for pipeline, a lot more of it is coming from like a human interaction, oftentimes in person. And so I would be thinking about sort of leaning into more ways to have more face-to-face time with your customers.
I'm seeing what was old is new again. So it's cold calling, it's gifting, It's handwritten letters.
Yep.
Something that I'm still not sure about is, so self-serve product-led growth, very hot, 2021, 2022. It was the way to do business. Then the market didn't do too hot, and self-serve was the first thing to cut investment, and folks were going more top-down and value selling. But now with AI, it feels like all buyers want to touch the product before they buy it.
Yes.
And so to me, self-serve, PLG, whatever you call it, is kind of something that's like fluctuating of, does this work as a long-term investment? I'm curious if you have thoughts there.
Yeah. So my best guess is that if you think about like multi-touch attribution, self-serve is going to be a factor in a lot of deals, even in enterprise. And so for me, this isn't like a, flavor of the week where it's like PLG is everything and then it's not. It's just something that good companies should do. Like you should enable buyers to buy the way they want to buy. You should meet customers where they are. And so there's obviously nuance depending on what you're selling. But if you were to tell me that like, I can try this thing as part of my like evaluation process versus I cannot, like, Costco has samples for a reason. You go there, you try it, and then you buy more of it. And so I just think it helps people make, much more informed decisions. I think the key again is like bringing down these internal barriers. Oftentimes like internal teams are fighting over like, is this a self-serve customer or this is a sold customer? It's like, no, there's no divide. It's a customer of our business or potential customer of our business. And we should just be making sure that like we're doing everything that we can to help that customer go through their education, evaluation, and buying process in the way they want to. And so I am very bullish on self-serve, product-led, giving people a taste of what the product is, especially in a world where people are skeptical on how much value AI can actually deliver. And I think it's something that like you need to feel like the first time you step in a Waymo, you're like, whoa. But if someone told you about Waymo, you're like, I don't know. And so I think it's just really nice to be able to use a product before you have to commit to it.
100%. And what I'm seeing, you can't get any deals done now without a POC or a trial or something. Like there was a wave for us where, you could just, large enterprises would spend a lot of money because it's something that they need and it's proven. This is so unproven that everyone wants to be able to touch it, see it, feel the magic before they invest a bunch of time, money, effort into it.
Well said.
Yeah. Meka, this was awesome. I feel like I have so many other questions that I could ask you. We'll save it for our next investor meeting, but that won't be recorded. But this is all the community gets, but so appreciate you being here. So fun as always. And where can people find you if they want to reach out, Meka, or they have a great founder to send your way?
They can find me on Meka at First Round, MEK at First Round, or Big Meka Style on Twitter or X. And you can find me on LinkedIn. And Alexa, every time we do this, it still brings me back to the first time we met when you asked me if I knew what product-led growth was.
You're just a silly little investor. I had to ask.
We've come a long way.
We've come a long way. Thank you, Meka. And thank you to the community. Excited for the next ones and have an amazing day.
Thanks. You too.